The man has very strong control over a country, far more than our president has been a leader. We have a divided country. And by the way, it would be great if we could get along with Russia, just so you understand that. Now, tomorrow you'll say, Donald Trump wants to get along with Russia. This is terrible. It's not terrible. It's good. I spoke indirectly and directly with President Putin, who could not have been nicer.
That's just a little snippet of the Donald's love for Mr. Putin over the past couple of years. Now, in the last segment, as you heard here, we read for you the email thread between Donald Trump Jr. and the man who set up that meeting with the Russian attorney. Now, congressional Russian investigators say they want to talk to Donnie Jr. about this, and lawmakers from both sides of the aisle, they are speaking out.
On its face, this is very problematic.
The investigation, it's not... nothing is proven yet, but we're now beyond obstruction of justice in terms of what's being investigated. This is moving into perjury, false statements, and even into potentially treason.
All right, let me remind you of some of the details we discussed in the prior segment. This is not gray areas. This is black and white. Even after Don Jr. was told that the person he would be meeting, the attorney, worked for the Russian government and had dirt on Hillary Clinton, he took the meeting. By the way, that lawyer says she didn't represent the government, so it's a he said, she said to this point. But the fact does remain. It is stunning that Don Jr. took the meeting after he was explicitly told in an email that she worked for the Kremlin and had information that would help her father win the election. Now, here's Don Jr. on CNN with Jake Tapper just 2 weeks after that meeting with the Russian lawyer.
Robbie Mook, the campaign manager for Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, I asked him about the DNC leak, and he suggested that experts are saying that Russians were behind both the leak, the hacking of the DNC emails and their release. He seemed to be suggesting that this is part of a plot to help Donald Trump and hurt Hillary Clinton. Your response?
Well, it just goes to show you their exact moral compass. I mean, they'll say anything to be able to win this. I mean, this is time and time again, lie after lie. You notice he won't say, well, I say this. We hear experts. You know, his house cat at home once said that this is what's happening with the Russians. It's disgusting. It's so phony. I watched him bumble through the interview. I was able to hear it on audio a little bit. I mean, I can't think of bigger lies, but that exactly goes to show you what the DNC and what the Clinton camp will do. They will lie and do anything to win.
Lie, disgusting, moral compass, phony, and now we have the email thread verified by Don Jr. After it was learned that the Times got their hands on it. All right, let's bring in our panel right now. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Jessica Proud, Republican strategist and PR expert with the November team. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. You know, guys, this segment I was going to talk about how this is going to impact healthcare on the Hill and all the rest, but let's just step back for a second, because sometimes I think between the political and even the legal, we get lost in the weeds. Let's just remember, Don Jr. gets an email from somebody saying, I've got an attorney with the Kremlin representing the Russian government with dirt on Hillary Clinton. He responds, I love it. This will really help later in the summer. Goes on in the thread to say this is really sensitive. We've got to be careful. We probably don't want to include your father. No problem. He then shows up to the meeting with a campaign manager at the time, Paul Manafort, son-in-law Jared Kushner. Now, there's no, oh my God, what are you talking about? You have dirt on Hillary Clinton. The Russian government does this? There's not a scintilla of shock or surprise that the Russian government would be involved in this. There's no, I don't know what we're talking about here. There's a familiarity, apparently, with the idea that the Russian government would have dirt on Hillary Clinton, and yes, I'd be more than happy to take a meeting with the top-level folks of the administration. Forget collusion for a minute, forget what they'll prove, forget what Mueller gets, forget all the rest. Just on its face, can you let's process what we've learned here in the last 72 hours. All the meetings that have happened with the Russians, all the Oval Office meetings that they were surprised that there was photographs of, all the meetings that happened at the RNC, and all the meetings in between. We now have context to clearly the Trump campaign and top-level members of the Trump campaign, not some schlep intern or whatever, they were not remotely surprised that the Russians were involved completely in this. This is a really big deal. Does anybody disagree with that?
No, I think there's even more to it than that, because Don Jr. is now, the 6th or 7th person on the campaign to have met with Russians during the campaign, did not disclose it publicly, did not disclose it on government disclosure forms for those who actually entered the Trump administration. Never, no information ever came to light on it until the press found out about it, at which point they dealt with it.
Well, they did 3 versions until they finally said, let's do a dump now let's get ahead of this.
In this last go round, but all of the meetings with, whether it's Flynn or whether it's Sessions or whether it's none of that has been disclosed publicly. So, and all of these meetings seem to come to Russian sanctions and sanctions that the U.S. has against Russia. So there's moneyed interests in Russia looking for benefits out of the Trump administration or out of the Trump campaign. And we also know that at the beginning of the Trump administration, they wanted to remove those sanctions. So there's clearly a quid here. And we now see that there is an attempt, to get even more stuff from the Russians in all of this. It brings brings back all of those questions from day one of this administration, which is, why are they so eager to work with and help Russia? And there's been no good answer for that.
No, and Dominic, for me, and I'm not trying to be disparaging to the city council, I'm just picking one example. I have never seen an amateur hour you all know, I think even if you like to watch, a political movie, let alone you're involved in this, there's a thing called cutouts. Who in their right mind?
No one.
First of all, on an email thread, would get that message, not first of all cover yourself and say, I don't know of what you speak, but then say, I love it. We could use it before the end of September. Then attend the meeting in person, bring the campaign manager and the son-in-law, who's got, to Andrew's point, to this point, the biggest exposure, because he's misrepresented himself on 3 different forums and for 3 different times not reflected meetings that were no-nos, okay? Who does that, Dominic? Who says the things they say? Who shows up? Who doesn't? I mean, you don't need to be involved in politics to say, what are you doing?
Someone
with like a British publicist that's involved with it's Keystone Cops.
It is Keystone Cops. It's a total lack of how politics how politics works. It's a total understanding of life. Somebody in the Russian government set the Trumps up really good, because Richard, this is a situation where, to your timeline, the way this should have gone. The email comes in.
Don't do an email first of all.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the president's son, the first thing he should have said was, I don't want to see it. And if it's in my name, delete it. Now, you as my chief assistant, you read it, you brief me on it, you go to the meeting and find out if they got some good goods on her, but make sure that there are no fingerprints that can come back to me. That's the way it's supposed to work. This is wide open, and I don't know how you get out of this.
And again, for me, Jess, this isn't, listen, you've been involved in a ton of campaigns. Of course there's opposition research. This is not new. That's not the shocker out of this that you'd want to find dirt in your opponent. However, this is the Russians. And by the way, the complete uniform denial over the course of the campaign before these emails, the insanity that we would ever work with the Russians. This is after he said, keep on hacking, let's get them, right? The political malpractice of this, forget about the ethics and that we're working with an enemy state, it's unbelievable.
And it's like the irony is so rich.
Emails and Hillary, right?
Over emails. I mean, you can't honestly make this up. And it is deeply problematic because it's his own words. And, clearly there's conflicting statements as a result of it. I don't know where this goes. I think you might be making a bit of a stretch at this point without a lot of evidence to back it up. Don't forget, President Obama was the one that made fun of Romney and said the 1980s called and want their foreign policy back when he was talking about the threat of Russia. So, clearly there has been a naivete about Putin and what he's capable of. That's been on display, and I think he kind of came in thinking that he could do a reset, if you will, and that Putin would have more respect for him.
That
no, I
leaves
think
out
that's
the whole
just the
chapter of
mentality.
working with them to advance his own
But
goals.
you can't.
Let's not pretend the
but
son
no,
and the
that's
campaign manager
irresponsible.
and
I'm
his
sorry.
son-in-law didn't connect with dad.
It is irresponsible at this point for any of us at this table to say that the president knew or didn't know.
Tommy,
No, I'm sorry. You
If
protect the
Chelsea
principle
Clinton-
all the time.
If Chelsea Clinton,
It doesn't
Robbie
matter.
Mook, who ran her campaign and picked the closest other advisor, had a meeting with a Russian attorney with the government, with the Kremlin, who they acknowledged in a thread to say, we've got dirt on Trump from the Russian government, would you say, well, we shouldn't think that Hillary naturally knew? Of
Yes.
course you
no,
would.
absolutely not, Richard, because there are tons of times when sensitive information comes up in campaigns that you don't inform the principal on, and you give them the ability to claim that they don't know.
Then why would you bring up every other top-level person in the campaign?
Well, that was dumb. I'm not defending what he did. It
And by the way,
makes no
with
sense.
the Russians.
However, I just think we can't go to that point yet. Clearly, something is going on behind the scenes, whether it's Manafort or Kushner in those meetings with the FBI. Maybe they're talking, and we'll see what happens. I think more information is going to come out of this.
You're right. There's a leap to a conclusion there, a potential conclusion. But then again, a week ago, it would have been the same leap on collusion.
Right, and I would argue that I think the Democrats were playing overplaying their hands, and Republicans were finally getting that edge that they could say there's no evidence, and now the Democrats have just been completely validated by this email chain. So it is a problem.
And forget about the bottleneck it puts on some of the policy changes that have to happen. Conversely, also think about where Republicans, I mean, there's an open, it's not attributed right now, but we're all hearing that Pence not only is raising money, but he's also having a lot of high-profile meetings with Republicans. Republicans are even thinking there are legs to this and this thing can continue to go forward. But Andrew, the most stunning thing out of all of this, beyond even the email threads and everything else, what happened at the G20 conference? Okay, now, we know how this works. Times has the emails. They go to the camp, they go to the Trumps and say, give us a statement on this. Donnie knows he's in deep trouble, okay? Campaign huddles or the administration huddles and say, what are we going to do with this? What do they know what don't? He tries the baloney thing about the adoption thing, that's what it was about, even though that's really about sanctions. But nonetheless, they try to do that first. Then they get down to smack down a second time, they find somebody else. With all this going on, Trump still tries and is still sucking up to Putin, and he tries to do that cybersecurity thing that the two of us will work together as nations to basically root out all evils with cyber hacking, when everybody says you're shaking the hand on the video of the guy who hacked. And now we know, and I'll suspend Jessica from this conversation, the three of us believe strongly that he knew back in June little Donnie's going out meeting along with son-in-law as well as also his campaign manager to get dirt on Hillary. And we're still having conversations with this administration of how we can get along with Russia. So, one of two things happened for sure. Either the Russians wanted him to win, then they were doing everything they could to stack the deck to help him out.
Intelligence community
Or,
says.
I think that's universal.
what a lot of people have said is they had certainly something on Trump and they wanted him to win. But it's one or the other. It's not, pick behind door number 3. But Mueller will have his day, and as I said with my guest in the A block here, it may need that he'll need more hands to continue this investigation because it keeps getting bigger.
I know. If they just wanted Trump to win, they could have released the emails. They could have hacked the emails and sent them to WikiLeaks without setting up meetings or anything else. Makes me think there's some other thing at play. I don't know what that is, whether it's financial or whether there's something
I've
else.
been saying for more than a year there's
Or
something.
maybe it's just a
hang on,
fabulous
this is
coincidence.
a legitimate point because what they've been known to do is create chaos, and maybe this was part of their plan. I hate to sound like crazy conspiracy theory,
but my only point is
they wanted him to get
Trump has never expended
set up by
political
this.
capital in his entire life if it didn't benefit him. He defended Putin when no one else has benefited for the past 2 years. Call me a cynic. I think we're starting to not have to wonder too hard as to why, but that's my thoughts. Coming up next, Officer Masoudis was laid to rest in the Bronx today. She murdered in cold blood last week while in a command vehicle. Mayor de Blasio, he attended the funeral, but NYPD officers, at least many, Not too happy to see him. We'll discuss that after this.